mentioned about policy and regulation issues as well in the beginning.
Yes.
What about your feedback on Indian IT Act? I don't know if you're aware of.
I have talked to people about it, but I don't know it in detail. So, for example, go ahead.
Okay. Just want to know, is it enough to deal with the cybercrime?
Well, without studying it in detail, I couldn't really comment specifically about that. But I can say that, again, going back to what we had said previously, is I think any of these policies, if they were going to be put into place, have to be able to be in a position to evolve. So, for example, we're looking at this incredible growth in mobile devices as one example. I mean, there are many, examples of what will happen over time from our IT infrastructure. But if you look at the number of devices that are going to be connecting into government networks and how mobile our users are going to be and how mobile our data is going to be. So if you set up a regulation that only thinks in the context of a laptop or a hardwired computer in our offices, then we've missed the boat. So I think it's a challenge that all of us, are trying to keep abreast of. Right now, for example, the U.S. government is saying we want this idea of continuous monitoring. We want to have government agencies reporting back to us on a regular basis in terms of their vulnerabilities and what they've done to mitigate those vulnerabilities. And they're doing it kind of in a phased approach. Maybe initially only Windows devices and then to Linux devices and so on. And now they've come out with a broader architecture. I think doing programs like that and bringing regulation and policy to bear, you have to plan for the future, or just say, we're going to provide guidelines that we refresh on an annual basis relative to, example, cloud computing, relative to mobile devices, relative to the latest threats that are coming out. And as long as you're doing it within that context, then it really serves to help the government in that regard. We can't just say, check, we finished that regulation, it was done 2 years ago, and it's certainly, helping us today. It doesn't work that way, unfortunately. Technology changes too quickly, as you know.
Just a flip side, India doesn't have a privacy law. How will it impact the whole system?
It's an interesting one. One of the things that the world economies obviously have been talking about is how much do we outsource to countries that lack some of these laws. And, I think countries around the world need to be cognizant of that reality. Companies are going to be more and more hesitant, I think, particularly as you've seen the number of data breaches increase around the world, regardless of where it is. There will likely be more and more attention to this. So EU, as you know, has very stringent data protection laws. Australia has been considering this for some time. The U.S. has its state by state different approaches and are now looking at a federal level one. Canada's very stringent as well, like the EU. And so the question is, as we look more and more at outsourcing, like as a cloud perspective, and we think about sending data to a country like India, or a country that doesn't have other privacy laws, I think it will be a challenge. I think countries will be very concerned about doing that and will demand protections for their data. And that's, again, presuming that data is what's being outsourced and not other types of services that don't bring as much risk to the company.
What are the McAfee solutions in this direction? I request you to talk something about your solutions.
So I think, this is, to me, one of the most exciting times for the company, because as we look at the threats to critical infrastructure increasing, and we think about what can make the greatest impact, it's not necessarily, for example, about having anti-malware protections on the endpoint. If you go into a control systems environment, they're very concerned about running antivirus because for them, the number one concern is availability or uptime. So when you approach a control systems network, you have to think about availability first. And the beauty of one of the acquisitions that we made in the last couple of years was around application whitelisting. So what is it that I want to allow on the network? Everything else is bad. So purely taking that whitelisting approach. So looking at that technology and also looking at the intersection of our acquisition by Intel, what that does for us is it provides us the platform in which to have an embedded security strategy. So what we're doing is we're starting work with Wind River, who is another subsidiary of Intel. And we've said, okay, they have a real-time operating system that is in numerous embedded devices. So mobile phones, medical devices, you name it, including SCADA systems, control systems. And so one of the things that we're doing now is we're putting an EPO agent on the Wind River operating system so that our centralized management platform can look at those devices as any other IT system. But instead, now I have an understanding of what that ATM is doing, that point of sale device is doing, that SCADA system is doing, from a traditional IT context, and saying, I need to secure that. And then the other thing that we are doing is bringing the application whitelisting to that Wind River operating system so that we can say, okay, we can control what applications get loaded onto that operating system and bring greater security to that operating system and the overall platform itself. So that's going to have tremendous, I think, ramifications for the sectors that we've been talking about. We also have been forging OEM relationships with some of the control systems vendors. So we already have a close working relationship with Invensys, who's one of the control systems vendors, and they bundle McAfee solutions with their control systems. And they're now looking at bringing application whitelisting into an integrated platform. We have a relationship with Schweitzer, which is another one, on their intelligence server for control systems, where they've integrated the whitelisting capability. And then the other one that we're very excited about is Siemens for their automation control systems. They've now tested application whitelisting and will be selling that to their customers who are interested in having that additional layer of security control. So very exciting times. There'll be even more happening with Wind River. And so I think you'll see throughout 2011 more announcements coming out about some of these developments. And that's where I think we need to get to stop just talking about critical infrastructure protection and actually what is it that we're going to do to enable greater protection, particularly as the control systems start connecting to IP networks and as we start talking as a world about the smart grid and as we deal with some estimates of 50 billion connected devices by 2015. I mean, we're literally talking about your surgeon in the operating room with a medical device that you need to think about, you know, from protecting from attack, straight out to cars now, where there have been proof of concept attacks, if you will, against individual cars to control the braking system and the overall, actually, several different systems on the car. So what ramifications does it have if somebody wants to target a government official, for example? So these are the things that we need to address now before we get to, you know, the 50 billion device mark. So I think it's exciting. I love it.
How do you see the Indian market?
I think lots of good opportunity for, you know, UID and some of the other things that they're doing for citizens. I was very excited to hear, you know, more people being reached. They were talking about financial services yesterday and enabling the mobile devices and more. So I think there's a lot of excitement here in India. So now we just, you know, we're looking forward to working with the Indian government as more of these projects roll out. So,
Thanks a lot.
thank you.
It was reassuring.
Great. Thanks for your time, too.